So let me just start with a confession. In the era of selfies, I'm really not self-obsessed. So the images that you see here are here for a reason. So like Anu said, I actually started my career as a motoring journalist. So all the cars that you see on roads, I was actually driving them, test driving them. And we would like wake up in the morning at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, drive down to the circuit or maybe somewhere towards Greater Noida where the roads are empty, and at times when the roads are empty, and actually test those cars, the 0 to 60, what is the top speed and all of that. And then we would come back and blog about it or write about it or do a video. So the pictures you see there is of a Mercedes B-Class that we drove at the Budh International Circuit where, there are all sorts of curves possible and flat roads and everything. And the picture down below is that of the Audi Q5. So we were taken to a track which was specially made for Audi and to test drive the beast actually that I would call it. But then the reality check came and I actually started getting to work myself. So driving from Delhi to Gurgaon every day, about 30, 40 kilometers, I would be completely tired. So by the time I would get to work, I would be like really cribbing. And even while on my way back, it would be the same thing. You know, at the toll, it was complete congestion. The roads were blocked, they were jammed, and I would really hate it. So I started observing the dubious nature of my work, that at one hand, I'm actually driving these cars, testing these cars, and on the other hand, I'm cribbing about it myself. So actually, I'm telling people to, buy these cars because they are pretty awesome. They actually do work, they have an amazing engine, they perform really well. And on the other hand, I'm constantly cribbing about my own drive to work. So let me just show you what happened when I was getting to work every day. Okay, so then of course this is not the ideal life for me. I mean, even if I'm working and really enjoying my career, I mean, even if I'm having the best time of my life, even if I'm served great food when I go to all these hotels for all the launches, this is not what I really want. That ultimately I'm not really happy with whatever I'm doing. So all the friends of mine who were the environmentalists, the sustainability officers, and everybody else who sort of loved the environment, they said, "You're a fool. Why do you take a car to work? You must be stupid to do that. You actually should use the public transportation." So I said, "Okay, let me try that." So then I kind of took the metro, and of course things weren't better even that time. The crowd was completely, I mean, the station was drenched in crowd, and it was really not possible, especially during the rush hours or the so-called when everybody actually gets to work. It's a very bad situation. So I thought, this is not what the solution is. So then I thought, okay, smart cities. Now this had become a buzzword by then. Everybody was using it. The Prime Minister's office was using it in all their PR language and everything. So I started looking at smart cities as one of the solutions. So I said, okay, fine, let's do away with the word smart because I really don't know what smart means. But let's look at cities first of all. So I started, for insights actually, I started looking around at how cities were behaving and how people living in those cities were behaving and what was their relationship with the whole traffic, with the whole cars and everything of that sort. So, so I thought that actually what I found was that people buy cars like they buy burgers. So like we want extra cheese in our burgers, we want extra chrome. And this is how we motoring journalists, we also put it in our language. So this car's got a huge gaping front grille, which is enamored with chrome, and it's got extra chrome strips. So I mean, all that lingo that we just use without even knowing is actually so much a part of our daily lives, and it's almost like we want extra cheese on the burger. Now, boot, I couldn't understand. Okay, so we always want the extra boot. So I asked a friend of mine, I said, okay, so how many times do you actually access your boot? And he said never, because I always go to work, and that's the last place that I want to access. But we still want to carry that extra boot, the extra space, probably fill it up with air or something, I don't know what. So now this actually picture here comes from an insight, and I was actually going to a temple, and there was a larger SUV, then there was a smaller SUV. So the guy on the larger SUV was for some reason he was just in the middle of the road, and we couldn't understand why he was there, probably waiting for his wife or something. And the guy in the smaller SUV was actually behind him, and he wasn't honking, to be honest. But then so there was a trail of cars which had all got jammed because this guy was not moving. So then he also started honking, the one in the smaller SUV. So the guy in the larger SUV got completely raged. He got off the car and held this guy in the smaller SUV by his collar, and it will shock you to hear what he said. He said, "तभी तो इस गाड़ी में है और मैं इस गाड़ी में हूँ. No wonder you're in this car and I'm in this." So I was like, really? And he's like right in front of a temple and saying such things. So since when have metallic objects started representing who we really are? I was really shocked by this discovery. And then we as motoring journalists, we always want to say, okay, 0 to 60 is this, top speed is this. But when this average guy who's read this auto magazine, he finally gets the car and goes onto the road, he finds, whoa man, there's no space for 0 to 60. Even if you try doing that, you're going to probably end up in a massive mess. So we feed him with stuff, with statistics, with figures, which probably he will actually never be able to use it in his real life. And this is legroom versus feet room. Well, this is the major debate. So we tell people to buy cars like this. We always tell them, look for the knee room, look for the headroom, look for the space and everything. You should sit like a king in your car. If your car doesn't make you feel like a king, you better not buy the car. But then this is what the reality of our lives today is. And this is not an uncommon scene. If you go on a metro or on a public transport right now, you will figure out this is what it is. So there's a huge disparity which exists in the way we actually, sort of drive in these cars and actually travel. And this is, this sort of comes from, we actually look at the CC of the engine, the displacement, the performance, the statistics, just like we look at diamonds. So, we talk about it at parties. So what is your car? What is the 0 to 60 of your car? Or what is the top speed of your car? How is it performing? And everything else, just like we would discuss diamonds over parties. And that is why we've all become a part of a big carbon family. We've all started generating carbon emissions. We've all got massive carbon footprints that we cannot see. So everyone, while you walk past somebody, we all have those huge bubbles of carbon emissions actually on the top of our heads. Again, this comes from an insight. So I was talking to a lady. She works as a sustainability officer in a top bank. And so I said, okay, great. So what do you do? She said, well, I'm the sustainability officer. My job is to actually look at how sustainable the company is. So we do a lot of carbon footprinting. We generate reports. We look at how can we cut down on carbon emissions. So every gram really matters to us. We also look at employee commuting under the scope 7, how are they commuting to work, and all of that. So we do all those calculations. So I said, great. So how do you get to work yourself to do this? She said, well, I drive a 5 Series. So I said, oh, you mean the one that is 2000 cc, 184 horsepower, the one that emits about 200 gram for every kilometer you drive, and probably 10 kgs of CO2 emissions every day? Uh, I do really mean that. So, I mean, we really don't know. We're not aware of all this, but this is so basic, and this is actually everywhere. Another energy company that I was talking to, and they had conducted a plantation drive, a tree plantation drive. So they'd gone around everywhere, actually planting trees. And it turned out that I just did some calculations for them, and we figured out that they were actually emitting, they actually emitted more in the process of tree plantation than than the trees would end up absorbing. So those are just fundamental things that we just tend to miss out on. And these are the basic inefficiencies. So even if we look at, so we always complain the infrastructure is not there, the governments are not good. But just look at this. This, for example, like this is what I call the parking space. But you know, the cars are parked way beyond the parking space, hence leading to much lesser space for the road users themselves. So this is what I call the virtual parking lots, which actually are non-existent, but they're there for us somehow. Right, and 2-minute parking lots. Okay, so boss, I'm just back in 2 minutes. Well, you're back in 2 minutes, fine, but if you add up all the 2 minutes, it's a multi-million hour problem, right? So yeah, so all the cars that you can see here are actually parked very haywire. Again, leaving much less space for the people who got to use the road. As you can see, the pedestrians, I'm not sure if you can see that clearly, but the pedestrians are actually walking somewhere there just because there's no space. So these are just those basic things. Even the infrastructure is there, but we end up doing this. So this is what I started looking at, and you know, by the end of all this, I had about 500 different pictures of how we were behaving in my phone. Sorry for that. Right. So these are the like 20 times more than me. Now this guy, no matter how fat he is, about 120 kgs, the car has to weigh 2,000 kgs, you know, 1,500 kgs, 2 ton, whatever. Even if you look at the length there, I mean, look at him and then look at what the car, how long the car is. So again, whereas this is all what we really need. So the chair that you are sitting on would be probably about 10 square feet, and the car is about 200 square feet. So again, these redundancies in the whole in the whole system, and so this is what I started observing, and this is what really sort of I was asking these profound questions: why is this happening? Why are there so many inefficiencies in the system? And we all love showstoppers when we go to watch a fashion show. But of course, I'm not happy if I have to actually stop my car just because your huge car has to change a lane, or it has to take a U-turn or something. So what is really happening is that we are having these cars that are sort of they expect the cities to be built around them, and not cars being built around cities, but it's actually the other way around. And this is where the fundamental challenge is. The 100-year-old DNA of the cars has not changed, or maybe it has. So earlier, horsepower was probably described as it was probably the measurement of the capacity of your engine, the performance of your engine, but now it is actually how many horses would be needed to carry your car when we actually hit an oil crisis, when there's no more oil to actually carry those big cars, those huge gas guzzlers. And this is again a very interesting thing. So there's a statistics according to which whatever money that India actually gets by exporting all the software, so all the Accentures and TCS and everybody else, the consultancies who are actually working to export software, whatever money they make out of that is actually half of what we give it out to the countries, the Middle East countries, to actually import oil. Right, so like we get to work, we do work, and then whatever work we make money out of it is only half of what we actually spend on getting to work itself. So raising this fundamental question, are we really driving to work, or are we working to drive? And then this is what really happens. So this guy says, good afternoon, sir, horrible traffic jam. I will be coming a bit late for the meeting. And the boss who's sitting behind him says, we are waiting for you, make it fast. Right. So if nothing is really done, of course, we'll end up being in the oblivion. The future lies in the oblivion. There's nothing that we can really see ahead. And China has seen that. So in Beijing, there has been a 13-day long traffic jam. People have been just stuck in there because there are so many cars, there's so much of congestion that people have just been stuck in there for ages. Yeah, so the kid is like, looks like we should ask mommy to bring some dinner over because probably we're not going home, right? So I think what I started looking at is that smart cities is a great word, but it will just be reduced to being a very literal word. So it will just mean, I don't know what it will mean actually. If we end up with our 3-box chunky metallic gas guzzlers trying to maneuver our way around, what would cities look like? So smart cities will only will be reduced to being a catchphrase, a buzzword, and nothing beyond it. And the picture that you see there is obviously of 2 women wearing air masks. Now this is a picture that comes from China, but statistics shows that actually India is much worse. India actually is, New Delhi is one of the topmost polluted cities in the world, and India even is ahead of China. Probably it's just that the business of air mask has not been has not caught up really well in India. There's no entrepreneur who has sort of tried to figure out a business model there. So maybe one of you can actually try selling air masks, and I'm sure it'll be a hit here in India as well because it's done reasonably well in China. So who suffers the most? Of course, it's not us, right? It's the fragile hearts and the fragile and the weak lungs of the kids and the older people. It's there who are the worst sufferers, whose lungs cannot deal with the particulate matter, the air pollution. So of course, what's the solution? I mean, I have been thinking over it. I really couldn't come up with it. It was my journey of looking at what the problem is and establishing the context, and it took me a long time to do that. And so I was always asking myself, what is the solution? So I went to the god, right? So this is the Lord Ganesha. So apparently he is known as the god of the beginning, which means he cannot afford to get stuck in traffic jams. He has to be there before the event starts. He has to be there. He cannot make excuses, right? So that is why he rides the mice. Because it's nimble, it's swift, he can just get around, he can just maneuver it very quickly. So my dad told me that he has a brain of an elephant, which means he's known to represent wisdom. So wise god like Lord Ganesha actually rides the mice to make sure that he gets to work really quickly. And then I went to the automobile manufacturers and I said, look, I don't want to work with you. You tell me what is the solution. Ultimately, you're creating so many cars and this is what we end up with. So they said, don't worry, Commute 2.0 is coming, which is Internet of Things. Everything will be on the cloud. So the cars would be talking to each other, the vehicle-to-vehicle communication. They would be talking to the roadside equipment, so they would be talking to the roads. They would be sort of moving around very easily. And just like ants actually talk to each other, so similarly cars would be talking to each other, communicating about the way. They would be communicating with the parking system, and it'll be fairly easy. Don't worry, we are working on the problem. We know it exists, and connectivity is the next big thing, and it's coming. So I was like, great. Then I went to a university, so I spoke to this third guy from Wright. He's the director of the MIT Smart City Lab at MIT Boston, and he said this is the solution to the whole problem that you're talking about. And this is a smart city car. It's just about 2.5 meters long, so fairly compact, and it's only about 450 kgs. And it's going to get you anywhere, wherever you want. Just sit in it. It's simply a one-seater. Just sit in it, and it'll take you to wherever you want to go. Most probably it will be autonomous as well, which means it will be self-driven. So I was like impressed, great. Then I went to the governments and okay, so this is actually a picture from London. Now Boris Johnson, who's the mayor of London, he's actually in the process of rolling out a policy which will only allow bicycles or smart cars to actually enter the heart of London. So these smart cars are again very compact, just 2-seaters, and easy to maneuver around, and you can just, and these would be the only ones which will be allowed in London. So this is something that he calls ultra low emitting vehicles, which means the vehicles which are emitting less than 80 grams per kilometer of carbon dioxide emissions. And he said this is what the solution is, right? So then I went to a technology giant. This is Cisco. Now Cisco has written a report, and so I'm speaking to the guy who's written the report just a few days from now. And this report actually suggests that we should have a card, a calorie card, and we should get governments to charge cars for their size, weight, and everything. So which means that if your car is bigger, you pay more. If your car is heavier, you pay more. If your car is actually a four-seater and you're driving alone, you pay more, right? So that is the report, and it actually wants the governments to start this dynamic pricing policy so that people are incentivized for smarter choices and they're disincentivized for dumb choices. So, okay, now let me introduce you the last video that I made as a motoring journalist, and I had already begun to ask certain profound questions by then. I'd already begun to wonder where the world is heading to, and so I made this video in April, and in May I was on a completely different tangent. I was doing something totally different, completely different. So let me just show you that video.
Urbanization, a word that connotes more negativity than prospects of future growth. Well, urbanization to me means 2-minute parking lots. Boss, just 2 minutes. Across the road. BRB, well, the BRB generation. It also means sprawling cities, far away from planned growth, high-rise buildings, and fight for parking spaces. So much so that violence prevails over practices of good neighborhood. It also means the bigger the better, the premium hatch or sedan, or now even the UVs. Well, single occupancy is not the concern. The concern still is space. Engine specs, anything over 1.5 is decent. Anything lower than that is an invite to a party where the flaunting rights shall be reserved. It means going shopping to markets that may not have space for people to walk. The side aisles will be reserved for parked cars, and the central lanes used up for walking by people and crawling by rickshaws, cars, and everything in between. The fundamental question still remains. Is the automobile industry powering mobility anymore? If dreams come in a small package, are they really not dreams anymore?
Right. So I mean, what I actually discovered was that roads are a shared space. We are responsible for whatever we choose, however whatever modes we choose, however we drive around. We are responsible for it ourselves because they are not. So the way they say, "Ye tere baap ki nahi hai." Actually, it's not, right? It's actually a shared space, and that's what I really figured out. So we are actually looking at nanolution, which is the power of smart as very aggressively, something with as low as 75 gram per kilometer and 600 cc. We're looking at ushering a revolution around energy efficiency. So nanolution is not about the car, it's way beyond. It's about the power of compact, the power of smart. And if you look at one of the smartest cities in the world, which is the city of Seoul in Korea, they've made energy efficiency the centerpiece of their entire conversation. And they've been able to cut down on one nuclear plant 6 months ahead of their plan just by making efficiency the linchpin of their best practices. So that is the power that efficiency can bring about. And that is what we are very interested in, where we're looking at how we can make that a conversation. We've also started a conversation around zero emission at universities to sort of sensitize students, because they would be the ultimate drivers of change when it comes to planning a sustainable future. And at our end, we are also taking the cause forward, again, by introducing Internet of Things in smart cities within universities, for professionals, within colleges and everywhere else. So we've been conducting seminars. We're also starting an online module and all of that to sort of just start a conversation around this, because this is very important. Our own choices will determine how we will be probably 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And in fact, the future does start now. That's one of the greatest learnings that I've had from my whole experience. And this is what really connects the dots for me, because as a journalist, I love talking to people. I loved interviewing people. So now I'm back on track. I'm doing this again, just that with a different set of people. So these are the people who are working in the realm of sustainable urbanization. So it requires me to connect with the professors who are teaching smart cities or urban environment policies, to consultants who are consulting governments on how to make cities smart, on how to make citizens smart. Then even people like those working at Bosch and the Ciscos of the world, again to build smarter cities and to retrofit smartness in our existing cities. And we're doing this because we believe that future belongs to those who prepare for it today. But I'm quite intrigued by the role that each one of you, I, everybody can actually play in the whole scheme of things. And I think smart cities are made of smart citizens and their behavior. They're really not the brick and mortar. So we're looking at how citizens can actually play a role in making our cities truly smart. So let me introduce you to one of the smartest citizens that I have ever met in my whole life.
चढ़ गया हमेशा जो और बिगड़ गया तेरी बारिशों का करम है ये मैं बिखर गया मैं सवर गया जैसा भी हूँ अपना मुझे ये नहीं है बोलना काबिल तेरे मैं बन सकूँ मुझे बार ऐसा खोलना सांसों की इस रफ्तार को धड़कन की इस जौहर को हर जीत को हर हार को खुद अपने इस संसार को बदलूं न मैं
Right. So while I request you to keep the conversation on, keep your hearts ignited, and you can always get in touch with me for that, I would like to borrow my last lines from the popular Hollywood celebrity Emma Watson. If not me, then who? If not now, then when? Thank you.